my name's Nate, a carpenter from Grand Rapids. 2 years ago, I lost my wife Emily to a car crash on I-96, leaving me and our daughter Ava to pick up the pieces. This Christmas, December 2025, I took Ava to Emily's family lake house in Traverse City, Michigan to scatter her ashes. Emily grew up there, loved the lake, and I thought it'd help us move on. The drive up was quiet, just Ava's playlists, some angsty Billie Eilish, and snow piling on my F-150's windshield. I didn't know the lake was waiting for us or that Emily had kept secrets buried under its ice. The house was a cedar cabin perched on Lake Leelanau's shore, pines looming like silent giants. The lake was frozen solid, a gray sheet reflecting the Christmas lights from empty vacation homes across the water. Inside, the place smelled of pine and mildew, with Emily's old photos on the walls, her smiling, always by the lake. Ava set her backpack down, urn in hand, and said, "This feels weird, Dad." I nodded, throat tight. Weird didn't cover it. We planned to scatter the ashes the next day, Christmas Eve. That night, I cooked hot dogs on the wood stove, trying to keep things normal. Ava was distant, scrolling X on her phone, muttering about local legends, some lady of the lake who drowned kids in the 1800s. "Just stories," I said, but her eyes lingered on the window, where the lake gleamed under moonlight. Around midnight, I woke to a sound, scratching, like nails on glass. I checked Ava's room. She was asleep, but her window was frosted over, patterns like fingers etched in the ice. I wiped them away, heart pounding, and saw nothing but snow. The lake was still, but it felt like it was watching. Morning brought more snow. Ava was up early, sketching the lake in her notebook. Her drawing was off, dark shapes under the ice, faces with hollow eyes. "They're out there, Dad," she said, voice flat. I laughed it off, blamed her imagination, but my skin prickled. I remembered Emily talking about the lake, how she'd swim alone at night, saying it called her. I'd thought she was being poetic. Now I wasn't sure. We walked to the lake to scatter the ashes. The ice was thick, safe for ice fishing, but I felt exposed, like the pines were leaning closer. Ava clutched the urn, whispering, "Mom's here." Before I could stop her, she bolted onto the ice, kneeling to pour the ashes. They didn't scatter. They sank, like the ice swallowed them. Then Ava screamed, pointing at her reflection. It wasn't hers. It was Emily's face, pale, eyes black, mouth open like she was screaming. I grabbed Ava, dragging her back to shore, but the reflection followed, rippling under the ice. Back inside, Ava was shaking, saying, "She's still out there, Dad." I locked the doors, checked my phone. No signal, just like always up here. I found an old radio in the basement, hoping to call for help, but it only picked up static, then a voice. Emily's, faint, saying, "Nate, come back." I yanked the plug, heart hammering. Ava was drawing again, frantic, pages of Emily's face, her hands clawing from the ice. "She wants me," Ava whispered. I tore the sketchbook away, but the pages kept moving, like something was flipping them. I drove to town, needing answers. The diner was packed with locals, gossiping about Black Friday deals. I asked about the lake, the legend. An old guy, face like leather, said the lady wasn't a story. In 1873, a woman named Clara drowned her kids in the lake after her husband died. Folks said she never left, claimed anyone who lingered too long. He looked at me, said, "Your wife loved that lake too much." My blood ran cold. Emily never mentioned Clara, but she'd spent hours staring at the water, like it owned her. Back at the house, Ava was worse. She sat by the window, humming a lullaby Emily used to sing. Her eyes were wrong, glassy, not hers. I checked the ring camera I'd set up outside. The footage showed Ava on the ice, but no reflection, just darkness under her. Then a figure, Emily, dripping wet, walking toward the house. The feed cut to static. I grabbed Ava, locked us in the bedroom, but the scratching started again, now inside the walls like claws digging through wood. At 2 a.m., the power died. The house was freezing, the lake glowing outside. Ava whispered, "She's calling us." I heard it then, Emily's voice from the lake, singing that lullaby. I looked out. The ice was cracked. A figure standing there, too tall, too thin, not Emily, but wearing her face. Ava bolted for the door, screaming, "Mom!" I tackled her, barricading the door. But the singing grew louder, vibrating in my chest. The window shattered, glass spraying, and cold air flooded in. Hands, gray, webbed, reached through, clawing at Ava. I swung a lamp, smashing them back. But they weren't human, dissolving into water. I carried Ava to the truck, but the engine wouldn't start. The lake was alive now, cracks spreading like veins, the figure closer, its face shifting. Emily, then Clara, then nothing. Ava was limp, whispering, "She needs us." I dragged her inside, barricaded the basement door, and found Emily's old journal under a floorboard. Pages were filled with sketches, faces in the ice, just like Ava's. The last entry read, "It knows my name. It wants my family." Dated the day she died. The basement door buckled, water seeping underneath, smelling of rot. I held Ava, sobbing, as the singing became a scream. The door burst open, and there she was, Emily. But wrong, her skin translucent, eyes like oil. "Nate," she said, "join us." Ava reached for her, and I pulled her back, screaming her name. The thing lunged, and I threw a chair, shattering it. Water flooded the basement, rising fast, and I carried Ava upstairs, out the back door, into the snow. The lake was breaking, waves under the ice, hands reaching up. I ran, Ava over my shoulder, until we hit town. I pounded on the diner's door. The old guy let us in, no questions. Ava was silent, her eyes still glassy. The sheriff came, found nothing but a flooded house, no figure, no cracks. They said it was a pipe burst, but I saw the journal in the water, open to a new page. Nate's next. We're in Grand Rapids now. But Ava's not the same. She hums that lullaby, draws faces in her sleep. Last night, I woke to water on the floor, no source. And Ava whispering, "She's still out there." I check X sometimes, see posts about Leelanau's lady. They say she never lets go. I burn the journal, but I hear the lake at night calling my name. I'm Lucas, a former firefighter from Marquette, Michigan. I used to run into burning buildings, but the one fire I couldn't stop took my brother, Sam, 10 years ago. I was too drunk to save him, and the guilt drove me to the bottle until I hit rock bottom. January 2026 marked 1 year sober, so I rented a cabin on Lake Superior's shore, deep in the Upper Peninsula, to celebrate alone. No bars, no people, just me, the pines, and a frozen lake to clear my head. I drove my Silverado through a polar vortex, snow burying the roads, thinking the solitude would heal me. Instead, something in those pines was waiting, and it knew my name. The cabin was a log shack, half buried in snow, pines clawing at the sky. The air smelled of frost and sap, and the lake was a slab of ice, black under the moon. Inside it was bare, wood stove, creaky cot, a single window facing the forest. The Airbnb host, some guy from town, left a note. "Stay warm, don't wander." I figured he meant the cold. The Upper Peninsula's winters are brutal, 40 below with wind chill. But I'd grown up here, knew how to survive. I lit the stove, cracked a La Croix, and tried to ignore the pine shadows dancing on the walls. First night, I woke to a sound, scratching, like branches on the roof, but rhythmic, deliberate. I checked outside, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing but snow and pines, their needles frozen stiff. The wind howled, carrying a low hum, like a voice too far to hear. I told myself it was the lake ice shifting, a sound every Yooper knows, but my gut twisted. Back inside, the fire was out, though I'd stoked it hours ago. My breath fogged the air, and the window was frosted over, etched with lines like a handprint. I wiped it clean, heart thudding, and saw a shape in the pines, tall, too thin, gone when I blinked. Morning was gray, the vortex locking the world in ice. I checked my phone. No signal, just like the host warned. I found an old radio in a drawer, AM only, and tuned to a Marquette station for weather. Static hissed, then a voice, Sam's clear as day, saying, "Luke, you left me." My hand shook, dropping the radio. It wasn't plugged in. I ripped the batteries out, but the static kept humming, low and angry, until I smashed it with a boot. I told myself it was a hallucination, stress from sobriety. But the cabin felt smaller, the pines closer. Day 2, I found tracks in the snow, barefoot, human, circling the cabin. They led to the lake, then stopped, like whoever made them walked onto the ice and vanished. I called the host, but the landline was dead, just a faint hum, like the radio. I checked X on my laptop using the cabin's spotty Wi-Fi and found a thread about the area. Locals called it the Hollow, a patch of pines where people disappeared. Hunters, kids, even a pastor in the 70s. They said the forest took what it wanted, left nothing but shadows. I shut the laptop, pulse racing, and noticed my breath wasn't fogging anymore. The cabin was warm, but the fire was out again. That night I dreamed of Sam, burning in that fire, screaming my name. I woke to knocking, slow, heavy, from the door. I grabbed my hatchet, kept for splitting wood, and checked the peephole. Sam stood there, 28 again, unburned, in his old Red Wings hoodie. "Luke, let me in," he said, voice muffled by the wind. My hands trembled, but I didn't open the door. Sam was dead. I watched him through the window, his face wrong, eyes too big, mouth stretched, like a mask slipping. He knocked again, then walked into the pines, leaving no tracks. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I found scratches on the door, deep like claws, spelling Luke. I packed my bag, ready to leave. But the Silverado's battery was dead, cables chewed through. I was trapped. Ava's face flashed in my mind, not my daughter, but the girl from the ice beneath, a story I'd read online, her dad's desperation mirroring mine. I pushed it away, focused. I checked the cabin's attic, hoping for tools or a radio. Instead, I found a box. Sam's old journals, ones I thought burned in the fire. Pages were filled with sketches, pines, a figure with no face. Words like, "It sees me." The last entry, dated the day he died, read, "Luke, don't come back." The radio hummed again, unplugged, Sam's voice chanting, "You owe me." I smashed it, but the hum came from the walls now, vibrating in my bones. I boarded the window, but the scratching followed inside the cabin. I found a photo under my cot, me and Sam, kids by the lake. But Sam's face was scratched out, replaced with a black smear. I burned it in the stove, but the flames flared green, the smoke forming his face, screaming. Night 3, the vortex worsened, wind shaking the cabin. I sat by the stove, hatchet in hand, when the door burst open, snow flooding in. Sam stood there. Not Sam, too tall, limbs bending wrong, face a hollow shadow. "You left me," it said, voice a chorus of static. I swung the hatchet, but it passed through, the thing dissolving into smoke. The walls bled sap, thick and red, pooling on the floor. I ran to the lake, thinking I could cross the ice to town, but it cracked under me, hands gray skeletal, grabbing my boots. I hacked free, crawling back to shore, the thing's laughter echoing. Inside, the cabin was wrong, walls warped, ceiling sagging, like the pines were swallowing it. I found Sam's journal open, new words written in my handwriting. "You're mine." The thing was in the room now, shifting. Sam, then Mom, then me, its face a mirror of my guilt. It whispered, "Drink, Luke. Forget." A bottle of Jack Daniels appeared on the table, unopened. I wanted it. God, I did. But I threw it into the stove, the glass exploding. The thing screamed, the cabin shaking. And I ran, no coat, no plan, into the pines. The forest was alive, branches clawing, the hum everywhere. I saw Sam, or it, everywhere behind trees in reflections, his face melting into mine. I stumbled into town, half frozen, collapsing in a bar. Locals said I was raving, talking about Sam. The sheriff checked the cabin. Empty, no scratches, no journals. Truck running fine, they called it delirium. But I saw sap on my hands, smelled smoke that wasn't there. I'm back in Marquette, AA meetings twice a week. But the hum follows me. Last night, my mirror showed Sam's face, not mine. And my fridge had a bottle of Jack, unopened. I dumped it. But I hear the pines calling me back to the hollow. I'm Owen, a history teacher from Alpena, Michigan. My life unraveled 2 years ago when my wife, Clara, took her own life, leaving me with a note that read, "You can't save me." Last February, my dad, a retired fisherman, died in his Lake Huron cabin under strange circumstances. Heart attack, the coroner said, but his face was frozen in a scream. February 2026, I rented that same cabin to mourn Clara and figure out what killed Dad. I drove my Jeep through an ice storm, Lake Huron's shore a blur of snow and pines, thinking solitude would bring answers. Instead, something under the ice was waiting, and it knew my sins. The cabin was a weathered box, perched on a cliff overlooking the frozen lake. Pines sagged under ice, their branches scraping the roof like fingers. Inside, it smelled of fish and damp wood, Dad's old nets on the walls, a wood stove, a single window facing the water. The storm raged, wind howling like a living thing. I found Dad's fishing log. The last entry dated his death. They're singing again. I shivered, blaming the cold, and lit the stove, the flames casting shadows that moved too much. First night, I woke to singing, faint, choral, like a church hymn underwater. It came from the lake, rising and falling with the wind. I checked outside, flashlight slicing the dark. The ice was solid, no cracks, but the singing grew louder, words I couldn't make out. Back inside, the window was fogged, a word etched in the glass. Owen. My breath caught. I wiped it away, heart pounding, and saw a figure on the ice, Clara in her red coat, staring up. I blinked, and she was gone, leaving no tracks. The singing stopped, but the silence was worse, like the cabin was holding its breath. Morning brought no relief. The storm trapped me. No cell signal, no Wi-Fi, the landline dead. I found a radio in the attic, AM only, and tuned to a local station. Static crackled, then Clara's voice soft, saying, "You let me go." I dropped it, the radio unplugged but still humming. I smashed it with a hammer, but the hum lingered, vibrating in my teeth. I checked Dad's log again, found older entries. "The choir knows your name. Don't listen." I remembered him muttering about voices, but I'd called it dementia, sent him to this cabin alone. Guilt twisted my gut. Day 2, I found ice inside the cabin, on the floor. The walls, thin veins spreading like roots. The stove wouldn't light, and my breath fogged in 20-degree air. I followed the veins to the basement, where Dad kept his fishing gear. The door was frozen shut, but I pried it open, flashlight shaking. The basement was flooded, water black and still, reflecting my face. No, Clara's, her eyes hollow, mouth moving. I backed away, slipping, and heard the singing again, now inside the walls, chanting my name. Upstairs, the window showed her reflection standing behind me, but I was alone. I swung my flashlight, shattering the glass, and the singing screamed, then stopped. I drove to town, the Jeep skidding on ice, needing answers. Alpena's diner was half empty, locals huddled over coffee. I asked about the lake, the choir. An old fisherman, face like driftwood, said it was no legend. In the 1850s, a cult drowned themselves in Lake Huron, believing the water led to paradise. Their voices never left, luring fishermen to their deaths. "Your dad heard 'em," he said, eyeing me. "Heard 'em too long." I asked about Clara, if she'd known the lake. He shrugged, but his eyes said more. "Clara grew up here, loved the water, but never told me about cults." I felt sick, her note echoing, "You can't save me." Back at the cabin, the ice veins had spread, coating the walls like lace. I found Clara's scarf, red, hers, on my cot, damp, smelling of lake rot. I burned it. But the flames turned blue, the smoke forming her face, whispering, "Come home." I checked the Ring camera I'd set up outside. The footage showed me sleeping. But Clara stood over me, her hands on my chest. The timestamp was 3 a.m. when I'd woken to the singing. I deleted it, hands shaking, and found Dad's old Bible, pages torn, verses circled. "The deep calls too deep," scratched in the margin. "They want us all." Night 3, the storm worsened, ice encasing the cabin like a tomb. I boarded the windows, but the singing returned, louder. 100 voices now, chanting, "Owen, join us!" The floor cracked, water seeping up, freezing into shapes, hands, faces, Clara's eyes. I grabbed my ice axe, ready to fight, when the door flew open, wind screaming. Dad stood there, unburned, in his fishing jacket. "You shouldn't have come," he said, voice not his, too deep, like the lake itself. His face shifted. "Clara?" Then nothing. A black void with teeth. I swung the axe, but it passed through, the thing laughing, splitting into shadows that crawled up the walls. The cabin warped, walls bending, ceiling dripping ice. I ran to the basement, the only place left, but the water was deeper, up to my knees, faces swirling. Clara, Dad, me. The singing was deafening, pulling me under. I saw memories, Clara on the lake, smiling, then screaming, Dad fishing, his hands bleeding, me, drunk, ignoring their calls. The choir surged, hands dragging me down, but I hacked free, crawling up the stairs. The thing was everywhere now, faces in the ice, voices in my head. You failed them. Join them. I found Dad's journal, new pages in my handwriting. The choir never sleeps. I tore it, burned it, but the flames sang, the cabin shaking. The thing took Clara's form, standing in the water, her eyes black. "You let me die," she said, her voice a chorus. I screamed, "I tried!" But she lunged, hands ice, pulling me toward the lake. I fought, axe swinging, and the cabin collapsed, beams cracking, ice swallowing everything. I ran, barefoot, into the storm, the choir chasing me, their voices in my blood. I woke in town, frostbitten, in a hospital. The sheriff said I'd walked 15 miles, raving about voices. The cabin was gone, sunk into the lake, no trace. They found Clara's ring in my pocket, one I'd buried with her. I'm in Toledo now, teaching again. But the choir follows. My reflection's wrong, Clara's eyes, Dad's scream. Last night my sink overflowed, black water, and the radio sang, unplugged. I check X, see Alpena posts. The lake's singing again. I hear it too, calling me back. And I'm terrified I'll answer.